This could have been any other parent-teacher conference. But let me set the scene for you. Katie's mom wanted to meet, but I wasn't exactly sure why. Katie was a sophomore, and she was a good student with a great attitude. So on the day, the three of us sat down. And we talked about Katie's grade, and Katie shared some concerns about an upcoming project. And we touched on one or two other pretty normal parent-teacher topics when Mom came out with it, her real reason for wanting to meet. She said, "Katie has noticed that you seem withdrawn recently, and she thinks there's something wrong." My first reaction was shame, that I had so poorly hidden my struggles that a 15-year-old had been able to sniff me out. My second reaction was to say, after a bit of a pause, "I'm experiencing severe depression." I would like to address some of the big problems that come with depression when you're a teacher. Now, teaching in and of itself is a stressful profession. We all have to deal with parent emails, administration, paperwork, and hey, just being in a room with 25 teenagers, that is stressful, just so you know. Yeah. Now imagine adding to those stressors feelings of hopelessness and lack of self-worth. The idea that nothing that you do really matters, and even if it does, you are the wrong person for the job. When you're experiencing depression, just putting yourself together in the morning, getting into a car, and getting to school can be overwhelming. Now, we don't talk about mental health in our professional development. And I don't really hear teachers talking about it amongst themselves. Depression carries a stigma that we fear having attached to our careers. And as a person who has been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, I worry that publicly acknowledging my condition might be used as ammunition against me. But tonight, I'm going to put those fears aside. According to the Centers for Disease Control, in this auditorium of, say, 500 educators, 36 of us are experiencing depression. I want you, my 36 friends, to feel seen. For everyone else, I'd like to paint a picture of what depression is like and how it affects someone you work with or maybe even teach. I want to amplify that many teachers struggle with mood disorders, but we are still dedicated to our students and to their success. I was 16 when I experienced my first depressive episode, and the hallmark of that event was that I wanted to sleep all of the time. I would come home from school and I would go to bed. That evening, I may or may not get up to do my homework and eat dinner, and yet, the next day, my father would still have to pick up the mattress and flip me out of bed. And from there, I would stumble into the bathroom and I would stay in the shower until long after all the hot water was gone, just feeling incapable of drying off and getting dressed. Now, eventually, that episode faded away, but I had another one a few years after that, and then another one a few years after that, and by then I was a teacher. Now, for me, a depressive episode is an endless loop of the same negative thoughts. I question who I am and what I'm worth to the world. And this loop of thoughts can be difficult to escape, kind of like this narrow canyon with steep sides that are almost impossible to climb. And the longer I spend with these thoughts, the deeper the canyon becomes. My feelings of worthlessness become crippling and brutally painful. My best description for it is it feels like someone's gone inside my brain with a baseball bat and just started swinging. Now, eventually I was formally diagnosed, and I understand my condition better, and that's some relief. But when I have a relapse, I'm fragile, and I have to push really hard to meet the expectations that I need to in my classroom. Now, most of the time, I'm healthy and fully functional, and the school year goes well. But occasionally, I do slide into that canyon, and it can show. For example, one year, I got a note during Teacher Appreciation Week. It was anonymous, and the gist of it read, "Dear Miss Rhoades, you are a great teacher, but sometimes you be tripping." As a science teacher, I am constantly thinking of classroom logistics. Laboratory activities that take a lot of preparation on my part may need 2 or 3 weeks of lead time. And if I'm depressed, this is where I can run into trouble. And that trouble may be something as simple as redeeming a prepaid coupon for some bacteria that I need for a lab. Last summer, the Huffington Post reported on a viral Twitter thread that was posted by Molly Bax, who's an author in Iowa who suffers from depression. In her thread, Molly describes something she calls the impossible task. Now, this is some small thing like moving your laundry from the washing machine and into the dryer. It's something that you know needs to be done, and it's simple enough to do. But for some reason, the idea of actually doing this small thing is paralyzing. In my case, ordering that bacteria will take 5 minutes of my time, and it will be delivered to me without any further effort on my part. So why don't I just do it? And I don't have an answer for you. There's just this anxiety-inducing mental barrier that I just can't push past for some reason. Now, think about how that could impact your classroom. There are hundreds of little decisions and tasks that have to be executed every day when you're a teacher. If just one of them becomes impossible, it can seriously impact instruction. And unfortunately, the impossible task is just one aspect of a depressive episode for me. There's one that really bothers me, and it does keep me awake sometimes, and it's this. Depression challenges your relationships with your students. When I'm depressed, I withdraw. I may not even be able to make eye contact with other people. And to maintain good relationships with your students takes emotional labor. When I'm depressed, it's difficult to find the energy to put in that effort. But I have to do it. The ultimate failure is to stop trying. So somehow, I have to become a functional teacher. And I have assembled a lot of little tricks and methods of support over the years, and I'm about to share my magic formula with you. My number one focus in dealing with depression is to not get depressed. Ta-da! I told you it was magical, okay? So, in my case, prevention has been the best medicine, and I do take medication. And I know that some of you may scoff at the idea of taking happy pills. And when my doctor first proposed the prescription, I resisted. That appointment was 20 minutes of me crying and wrestling with that decision. I told my doctor I don't want to take pills. I would not feel normal if I had to take pills. And he had to gently point out to me, Kari, you're not normal now. So I take the pills. And I'm far from alone. 12.7% of Americans are taking antidepressants. Now, I also try to light up my brain and change my scenery whenever possible. An example of this is a summer research opportunity I had with Charlotte Teachers Institute. And Scott Gartland, the director of CTI, is out there tonight, I know. Yay, Scott! I got to spend 3 weeks in the laboratory of Dr. Marcus Jones and Kathleen Dipple at UNC Charlotte. And here you can see me with my colleague Wendy Potter, who's a teacher at Butler High School. This experience was transformative for me. I felt brainier and lighter in spirit every time I walked into that laboratory. So I am really grateful for that experience. Now, I also boost my endorphin levels, and I do that with exercise and companionship. I have a light yoga practice, and I run and I hike. The running and hiking need a little bit of an external motivator, and here he is. This is Scooby, and he lives to run. He must have exercise to be healthy and content, even when I'm at a low point. So there's no way for me to kind of turn away and say, I can't right now, when this is a daily need for him. Now, you may have noticed that I've not mentioned therapy until right now. And this tweet will explain why. I'm on board with everything it says up there. Now, I only go to therapy when I'm at my very worst. And it's not because I don't think it has value. It's simply because I can't afford it. So screaming into the woods it is. All right. Teachers struggle, and we need to recognize that. To a person with a normal brain, depression doesn't make much sense. Why can't you just snap out of it? Is something that you'll hear from time to time. And if you're living or working with someone who's suffering from depression, your frustration is understandable, but there's no way for them to just cut it off. So what can you do? Well, just like if you had a colleague with an obvious physical impediment like a broken arm, teachers with depression can use a helping hand. Figure out what their impossible tasks are. Ask if there's something that you can do, like help straighten their room after school. Your quiet but real support can be a godsend. I also encourage you to check on your students. The diagnosis of depression in children has risen sharply in the last 20 years. So it's possible that you have a child who is like me at 16 sitting in your classroom, coming in with wet hair and no homework. Let them know and let their parents know what you're noticing, and do what you can to help move that student forward. I want to end tonight by going back to that parent-teacher conference. When I revealed to Katie and her mother that I was depressed, they both burst into tears. And after her mom had collected herself a little bit, she told me why. Katie had recently entered therapy for depression. Here's a 15-year-old, depressed herself, worried about me, her teacher. Her parent is worried about both of us. We formed a partnership that day. It may not have been a happy ending for a parent-teacher conference, but it was a good one. Thank you.